vulnerability could be exposed is so utterly shocking, I think, to Americans that it made it important to join hands. And however long it lasts, whether it's days or weeks or months, who knows. Certainly there will be days and issues coming up where political differences will emerge again, as they always do. But one wonders, can't know, but wonders, if something profound here has happened.
John King at the White House. John, a lot of care went into preparing the remarks that we heard from President Bush today.
That's right, Judy. The White House realizing the president here faces a number of challenges. On the one hand, it is his job to try to console the nation, certainly to rally the courage of the American people, if you will. Senior advisors here saying that in the days, months, and years ahead, this administration will be committed to a war against terrorism. Emphasis on years ahead. And we're told there could be some military response, perhaps even in the days ahead, if the president is satisfied that the investigation has come to a certifiable conclusion about the responsible party or parties. But also a senior official last night telling us this will be fundamentally different from anything the United States has ever done before in response to a terrorist attack in terms of military operations, a financial effort, a diplomatic effort to crack down on terrorists and the states that harbor them. So the president trying to prepare the American people for what could be a sustained campaign at the very moment he is also trying to help console those legitimately angry and who have great grieving ahead of them because of their losses. Now, let's go back inside the service for just a minute. On the one hand, the president quite emotional, paying tribute to the firefighters, the policemen, those who lost their lives trying to save the lives of friends. But even here at this moment of national reconciliation, the president speaking from the pulpit, delivering a very stern message, promising that the United States would respond.
This conflict was begun on the timing and terms of others. It will end in a way and at an hour of our choosing.
And for all the remarkable moments, we saw the president as he walked off the altar go back to his seat, sitting down next to Laura Bush, reaching across his father, the 41st president of the United States, a little pat and a handshake there, the former president telling the current president, job well done. A remarkable moment on a day, and after 3 days of remarkable moments, some of them horrific, others quite moving. Judy?
John King at the White House. President Bush leaves the National Cathedral, heads to the airport here in Washington to fly to New York City. His first visit, of course, to that city that is suffering so much since Tuesday's tragedies. The president will be visiting the site of the World Trade Center disaster. CNN's White House correspondent Kelly Wallace is in New York. Kelly.
Judy, exactly right. The president will be coming here. He said he wants to come here and get a first-hand look at the horrific damage left behind by Tuesday's attacks, but also to thank the hundreds, the thousands of rescue workers who are turning out, who are working hour after hour to try and search for any possible survivors. The president aide said earlier in the week definitely wanted to come to New York, but he didn't want to get in the way. He didn't want to get in the way of rescue operations. The president had a conference call yesterday with New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani and New York Governor George Pataki. The New York leaders and members of New York's congressional delegation had invited him to come to New York and had assured him he absolutely would not get in the way, and so he told them during that call that he would be coming here. And Judy, almost all, we believe, of the members of the New York's congressional delegation will be traveling with the president on Air Force One, including New York's two senators, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton and Senator Chuck Schumer. And to show you how this tragedy really hits home, one member who will be traveling with the president is Congressman Joseph Crowley, who represents mostly Queens and the Bronx. Judy, he comes from a family of firefighters and police officers. We understand his father was a police officer. He has many cousins who are police officers, firefighters, and he has one cousin, Judy, who is a firefighter, a battalion chief with the New York City Fire Department, who has been missing since Tuesday. He has not been heard from since that second plane hit the South Tower. So the congressman's staff telling us that the congressman very, very pleased that the president is making this trip, saying it will be a real morale boost for the New York City area, a message that New Yorkers, the nation, stand united and stand together at this time of great tragedy. Judy?
No doubt, Kelly Wallace. And again, you're reminding us that so many families in this country, on the East Coast and elsewhere, affected by what, 5,000 missing in New York City. And when you add the 200 or so at the Pentagon, the numbers are just mind-boggling. And each one of those represents a life cherished by those loved ones. Aaron, we are hoping to talk shortly here with Senator Joe Lieberman, who of course was a Democratic vice presidential candidate. We saw him inside the cathedral. We hope to talk with him and also with some of the firefighters who were taking part in this service at the National Cathedral. Aaron?
As people file out, you saw virtually the entire Washington political establishment, saw Alan Greenspan, Federal Reserve Chairman. In the cathedral also were 170 members of the diplomatic corps. Of the 175 countries that keep embassies in Washington, 170 sent representatives. They went to the State Department. They signed a condolence book. They rode over together on buses. It speaks to how this tragedy, this catastrophe, has shaken not only the country, but how it has awakened in many ways the world at large, and they have stood, countries around the world, with the United States. That is but one sign of that. There are many, many others. Here's CNN's Richard Quest in London.
As the clocks across Europe chimed, a silence descended. 3 minutes to remember those who had died. In Paris, sightseers came to a standstill. In Britain, crowds gathered outside the American embassy, while members of Parliament stopped their emergency debate to remember. At Heathrow Airport too, passengers, many of whom had been stranded, stopped as well. From Berlin to Brussels, it was the same. Politicians and people united in a moment of quiet thought and prayer. Even at Harrods, London's famous department store, announcements asked for 3 minutes of respect. And when it was all over, a service of remembrance began at St. Paul's Cathedral. Britain's Queen Elizabeth joined the American community to pay tribute and remember. Richard Quest, CNN, London.
Contrast the warmth of the service at the National Cathedral and the events overseas as well with the cold, harsh realities of what is going on in New York and in Washington as the rescue and recovery operations continue. It is a chilly, wet day in New York that is hampering the rescue operations. A couple of other notes to make as we catch everyone up on where we are right now. The President has authorized the Secretary of Defense to call up as many as 50,000 reservists. Not expected the number will go quite that high, perhaps 40,000, many of them pilots, and they'll be flying patrols around the United States. And other soldiers will be brought in to help do some relief work. People here in Washington who are trying to manage the scene, the crime scenes, that's what they are, look very weary, very tired, and they'll get some help when the reservists are called up. CNN's Martin Savage has been for the last couple of days down and around Ground Zero. It is a wet and difficult area today. Marty, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Aaron. And throughout the service, throughout the morning, throughout all of last night, it was a very cold rain and a very bitter and biting wind that was blowing through the streets of New York, passing through the area where the desperate search for survivors is continuing. It is a mood that perhaps weather-wise is not reflected across the country, but in feeling it seems to go that way. For the rescuers, the weather has been very problematic for them, especially in the last 12 hours. The rain has been difficult for them because it makes it very treacherous just moving around that very big debris pile that measures about 100 feet tall. Once used to be 2 towers, 110 stories tall. On top of that, though, is the wind. We've already told you a number of times about the structural damage and the concerns about a number of buildings that remain standing but may not be fully sound. The wind blows through those buildings, and rescuers that have been in the area and engineers say that they see gaps in buildings now that are beginning to widen, and that is only increasing their concerns about the stability of those very structures looming over those that are working so hard to try to find those that may be trapped down below. We can tell you that even though the nation may have paused to remember, there was no stopping here, at least not at this checkpoint, which is just about 3.5 blocks away. All of the activity continued here. There is too much to be done and too little time to waste in order to stop. They felt it was important to keep moving. One thing that is noted, security increasing almost by the hour, obviously in preparation of the president's visit. It is clear that they have a lot of work to do, and they are about that job at this hour and for the hours that remain. One last thing we wanted to show you, Aaron. There is a flag that flies at the top of the American Express building. That flag has a story. It was placed there by a New York City firefighter. His father died recently. His father was also a colonel in the military. That flag draped his father's coffin. He felt that it was appropriate to place at the top of that building the highest presence in this area as a salute to his father and also a remembrance to all those who have died. He would not give us his name, but he felt that it was very, very important for everyone to know that it was there. There are many stories down here, Aaron. The biggest one of all, though, still continues, the search for survivors. Aaron?
And no one is watching that search for survivors more carefully, with more hope, than the hundreds of people who have gone to the Armory here in New York. It's been open 24 hours a day. They go there in search of information. Hillary Lane is there as well, and she joins us now. Hillary. Hillary, can you hear us?
Yeah, Aaron, I can hear you. Let me tell you a little bit about what is happening behind me. We are at the Missing Persons Bureau, which is the giant armory that has been set up for these purposes. There are 2 lines here, one for people who still have to file missing persons reports, and I have to tell you there were hundreds of people in that line yesterday, and there's nobody in that line today. There is another line on the other side of the building, and that is for people who've come back with more information. Apparently inside they've been asking people to bring in dental records if they have them, to bring in hairbrushes if they have them. All of that information could be used for DNA purposes, for DNA sample testing that is sure to take place as they do recover bodies from the wreckage downtown. Now, I'm here right now with Suktan Shin, whose brother was working on one of the higher floors at Fiduciary Trust.
The 90s.
You said you spent hours in line yesterday, and today you appear to be incredibly frustrated. Tell me what's happening.
Basically, we have spent hours and hours in line waiting to see Liz at the Center in St. Vincent's and at the Armory. It's just a process that we had to go through. And we went through it again and again and again with the people that are trying to help us. And it's just very, very frustrating. And at this point, after not finding any news, we are very desperate.
One of the things that was happening, you were telling me earlier that you hadn't been able to contact anybody from the company. And as we were standing here, Alan Lum came by. You're looking for your cousin. You saw Mrs. Shinsign. You started to talk to her. So tell me what you saw and what you have told her.
Well, the first thing I noticed is that and everything, her brother from Fiduciary Trust, it so happens one of my partners, John Bosco, had barely escaped, right, from Fiduciary Trust with his life, and I approached her, and said, look, I can't guarantee anything, but I'm going to call my partner John Bosco to see if he heard or saw Robert and everything, and also there are several other people that we do not know that he had gotten out there with, and we're going to ask them if they saw Robert and potentially give you some information to continue hope.
And then the two of you now have exchanged